Hola, cage fighting connoisseurs. Once again, we've got Kid Nate of BloodyElbow.com, joined by Bloody Elbow's own preview specialist, Dallas Winston, to break down the UFC on FX7 Bisping versus Belfort fight card, as well as Bellator 85, the 8th season debut, the first time on Spike. Dallas, how are you doing today?
It's a little what?
Huh?
I'm all right. I'm all right.
Yeah,
Late nights, a lot of extra hours lately.
I see you brought somebody home from the clubs with you.
Yeah, I scored. I
Scored pretty
scored.
big.
I scored last night. Yeah, I
I
mean,
heard it's hard. It's easier to get Chewy home with you than it is to get him to make breakfast and leave.
stay the night. Right.
Yeah.
I had to work at it, but it's well worth it.
Well, I'm happy for you. Happy for Chewbacca. It's been a long time coming. So,
For the
Bellator
support.
85. 3 fights on the main card, 2 title fights. What are you looking for? We got Pat Curran versus Patricio Freire. I believe they call him Patricio Pitbull on the TV for some reason. What do you think about this? Curran, longtime favorite, who really clawed his way up the hard way, and now I think might be the Bellator champion that lasts the longest. I think people are pretty high on him. What do you got to say about this fight?
I'm one of those people for sure. I did a collaboration judo chop with Frazier and Jack Slack because he does so many little subtle things, especially his defense. I think at lightweight when he fought a lot of the big guys that were supposed to steamroll him, like Huerta and especially Eddie Alvarez, even though a lot of people were disappointed in that fight, the defense, the takedown defense, I mean, he's like a little turtle. He's just got that hard exterior, and it's really hard to mount offense on the guy. Um, Before I go into the Pitbull fight, I think Curran would do phenomenal in the UFC's featherweight division. I mean, I right
Yeah,
now I think he's that good. He's
but
one of
he's
the
not Jose Aldo good.
no, but I mean, as far as what nobody's Jose Aldo good or Jose Aldo good, but I would put him up there with every other UFC contender in the mix right now, except maybe the Korean Zombie. I just want to see that fight so bad, and that would be total opposite because the Korean Zombie's balls to the wall, take risks, and Curran is the exact opposite. But
Not that he doesn't take risks. He's got a very conservative fight. Conservative's the wrong word. He's got a very tight defense, but I wouldn't say he's not somebody that kills the action.
no, he's really judicious, and that's what I tried to point out in that judo chop. Is right after the Alvarez fight, he got kind of lambasted for being too passive. But then when he dropped down to featherweight after that, I mean, the dude went nuts. I mean, he's throwing not only just a bunch of flying knees. I mean, there's a GIF where he's like getting his steps and doing a full sprint all the way across the cage to throw a flying knee. And when he does it, he keeps his hands up. He does a lot of really little subtle things. So I'm thoroughly impressed with Curran right now. I think he's easily legit top 5 in the world, and I'd put him right up on the same level with a lot of the contenders for Jose Aldo. Bless you. Because he's one of the most legit, solid, three-dimensional guys in the game. His striking is sweet. Bless you. And
Thank you.
yes, fine, I'm here. Um, his wrestling is really solid, especially his defensive wrestling. His submission skills are sick. I mean, Peruvian neckties.
Luis
Um,
Palomino, yeah, that was no joke. That was pretty sweet at Bellator
yeah.
46.
So anyway, sorry for the early tangent to start us off right off. That's what you get for
And
waking
no,
me up
we
this
gotta
early.
go. We gotta wander. We got these fields to wander, Dallas. Your
Didn't take
mind,
long.
it holds infinity. So
Oh,
Pitbull, Patricio Pitbull. He's coming off a tournament win, won the season 4 featherweight tournament. Notched a couple of fairly big names for Bellator. Knocked out Wilson Heiss, a very impressive win over Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion. Knocked out Georgi Karakhanyan. Karakhanyan.
Garrett Canyon.
Karakhanyan, an Armenian kickboxer, and then got decision over Daniel Strauss. Pretty impressive resume, but I don't think many people are giving him much of a chance over Pat Curran. I mean, it's one of those situations where you've got the irresistible force of Pitbull's offense hitting the immovable object of Curran's defense, but I don't think Pitbull is quite at the irresistible force category on offense.
He's very irresistible, first of all. Actually, what you just touched on makes this really interesting because he's, I mean, ridiculously aggressive. And even if it's not, immediately effective, the fact that he keeps that pressure on nonstop, I think that's a concern with the way that Curran starts to get real patient, overly patient sometimes. So from Pitbull's side, he's got big punching power. He's got pretty good wrestling. And black belt in jiu-jitsu out of Team Nogueira. We haven't seen a ton of him off his back or really grappling wise. That's not necessarily. He's mostly a stand-up guy. He'll stand and throw. So I could see maybe him just putting it on Curran nonstop and Pat going, even though he's phenomenal at defense, defending too often if it goes to the scorecards. But overall, I like Curran here. I think he can get the decision. He's going to be a little bigger. His wrestling he's going to have a big advantage. I mean, even if you want to call the submissions that it's going to be a wash and equal each other out, I'd say their striking is pretty close, but Curran's chin is real solid, and I think he's just a little too crisp and technical for Pitbull. So I could see a late TKO, but I think decision might be a little more a safer pick.
Yeah, I think this is one of those fights where Curran's going to ride out the early blitz and then drag Pitbull into the championship rounds. And I don't know that he'll kill him in those rounds, but I do think he'll clearly show his dominance, and that all he has to do is win one of the first 2 rounds if he wins the 4th and 5th round, which is not a position you want to put yourself in, but honestly not how I see it happening. I see Curran winning. If it goes 5 rounds, I see him winning at least 4 out of 5. I think his defense is just too tight. But up next, we've got a veteran, Renato Babalu Sobral is going to be making his Bellator debut. The UFC and Strikeforce veteran is going to be fighting Mikhail Zayats. What do you know about this Zayats guy? He's an M1 veteran, and I believe this is his Bellator debut. Yep,
it is. I don't know a ton about him. I've watched a couple of his fights, and solid candidate, but this is the only downside with Bellator is they don't really have the gradient of different, their roster isn't as diverse where they can. So I think they're kind of throwing Babalu a bone here. Babalu's not what he was in his prime, obviously.
He's 37 years old, and that's quite different, from the fighter that many of us remember when he was, say, 30 years old, or even 26, 25. Babalu, I think twice fought for the UFC title against Chuck Liddell, got murked both times. Had a pretty good run after he got kicked out of the UFC for excessive savagery against David Heath, and some bad sportsmanship. I think he bragged about not letting the chokehold go when the referee told him to.
It's a little harsh, though. I mean, that's not uncommon that we see that. Penn did the same thing to Pulver, and I don't think it's great, but I mean, I think he was made the example, I think.
He was made the example, and it's also very true to the UFC's pattern that you've got somebody like Babalu who was pretty high paid for somebody. He was paid like a title contender and a potential champion, and then once it was clear he wasn't going to be a champion, then he not only lost to Chuck Liddell, but then lost his comeback fight to Jason Lambert, and pretty much an inexcusable Babalu dominated the first round and then just got sloppy with the dangerous guy and got knocked out. And never really got his career back on track after that. Had a couple of fights in Affliction, submitted Sukaju, beat Bobby Southworth in Strikeforce, but then he got murked by Gegard Mousasi and Dan Henderson. Took a sort of lackluster decision over a much smaller Robbie Lawler, and then the only thing he's done since then was beat Tatsuya Mizuno last year and won. So it's good to see him back in Bellator, but definitely not the future of the division or anything else.
No, I mean, a great addition for him, though. Name recognition, and I think it's a good opportunity for Babalu too to, I guess, prove. Obviously, he wants to prove, but I want to look to see if he's still that, A- level fighter that he used to be that can compete with all the big boys. I mean, losing to Mousasi and Henderson, there's no shame in that whatsoever.
No, but he got crushed by those guys. I mean,
I was shocked by the Mousasi fight. Mousasi gave him the Spirit World punch, and he was. I mean, that was one of the few times. That was like a Steve Nelmark Tank Abbott, like a fuck is he dead knockout. Yeah. So, but either way, I mean, compared to the guy that he's facing, Zayats. I mean, I don't really see. You know what I mean? I mean, he's been around the game forever. I haven't seen anything from Zayats that would give me the confidence to pick him over a veteran like even the older, slower Babalu.
Yeah, there's nothing really jumping out about Zayats. I mean, he's a European Jiu-Jitsu champion. He's got some M1 experience. He's a Russian Army hand-to-hand fight national champion, Sambo veteran. I just think he's sort of picture perfect for Babalu because Babalu is a grappler. Babalu is one of the first guys to combine really excellent wrestling with excellent submission grappling skills. Came from a luta livre background before he got his jiu-jitsu black belt. And, just very dangerous at that combination. He's always struggled with sprawl and brawl guys who can keep the fight on their feet and beat him standing up. And I don't see any indication that Zayat is that way. So I'm going to pick Babalu. I assume you're going to do the same thing.
Yeah, I am. Babalu's stand-up, a lot of people talk about his Thai background and everything, but I haven't always been that impressed with it.
No.
Zayat, he could be a little bit of a force in the clinch. He's a pretty big, strong guy. And I don't know a lot of, it's tough to, correlate those jiu-jitsu achievements you just mentioned, but it's possible he could overpower, out-wrestle him and shut down some of his submissions. But yeah, I'll take Babalu in this one.
Is Babalu going to be in the Bellator tournament this year, or is he going to be fighting kind of in showcase fights?
Well, I don't know for sure, but I do know that I was pretty impressed. Bellator addressed the complaint about the tournament format, which I love. One of the downsides from the fans was that the champions don't fight enough.
Yeah.
So they came out, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but they wanted to address that, and they wanted the champ to fight 2 or 3 times per year. So I don't know if he's going to be in the tournament or not, but he'll definitely get some airtime and get a chance to, he'll have the opportunity in front of him. It's up to him what he does.
Yeah, and so the Bellator fights are going to be on tonight on Spike TV, but the preliminaries are going to be on Spike.com, and I know we're not going to talk about those, but I do want to mention that Mike the Joker Guyman and Jason Lambert and Seth Petruzzelli are all going to be on that card. So
strong card. It is a real strong card overall, and I'm excited to see how they do on Spike. It's a big deal for them.
It's a very big deal, and I think a big deal for MMA. And that brings us to the lightweight championship. Michael Chandler, the man who beat Eddie Alvarez in one of the best fights of 2011, maybe one of the best fights of the decade so far, is going to be defending his title against Olympic judoka Rick Hahn. This is a fight I'm pretty excited about. Chandler's a guy who's shown he can take a beating and give a beating, and he's somebody I think would do really well in the UFC lightweight division. I'm going to come out on a limb there. I would rate him a toss-up to beat Ben Henderson. I think he's somebody who could walk into the UFC today and take the title. I mean, big words, but it is what it is. I don't think we're going to see him in the UFC anytime soon, but I think he's an excellent lightweight, and I think Rick Hahn is a serious threat with his judo, kind of a sprawl and brawl fighter, because he's added pretty good striking, nothing too fancy, but some solid power, pretty disciplined fighter, and if he gets you in the clinch, odds are you're going to end up on your ass, maybe flying through the air on the way there. So what do you think about this fight?
Well, I agree with what you said before. I think both of these guys would hold their own in the UFC for sure. It's interesting you said that about Chandler, because it's not that I'm not high on the guy, but the general consensus is everyone's really high on him. The thing that I'm most impressed with him is he's really inexperienced. I think he's only been training MMA like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, so, he's kind of a savant.
Yeah.
Prodigy, rather.
Right.
He's only 26. And
coming in that raw and showing the improvements he has, and then also
his first pro fight in August of 2009.
Right. So that's prodigy-ish. He could be that good, and he's still young. Especially taking on a guy like Eddie Alvarez, who everyone was really down on him after he lost that, but then Eddie came back and knocked out Aoki. Eddie's still whatever, always contentiously ranked outside of the UFC, but I think a top 10, top 15 at least.
Yeah, a long-time top 10 fighter.
Yeah, for sure. He's beyond legit. The thing that makes me a little hesitant, that fight was excellent because they both took a beating. And what I'm almost flabbergasted by with Rick Hahn. He's an Olympic judoka, but when he started to show up in Bellator about halfway through his career, the kickboxing proficiency that he showed was really phenomenal. It was, the easiest thing for a guy with any kind of grappling background to do if they want to get their striking up to par is go the Dan Henderson route and just get a big, nasty right hand, because in MMA, if you punch someone hard in the face, they're going to fall down.
Yeah, but power can't be taught. That's the thing, and Hahn seems to just have it.
He does, and that's why I really appreciate that he's gone the technical route with I believe Delagrate out at Sichitong. But he is super polished. He's methodical. His defense is really good. He's just really technical. Good footwork, good head movement. He's got like all the basics down to a T. And now that he's got those basics down, he's starting to throw some serious power in.
And is Hahn, am I correct that Hahn is the first 2 weight class tournament champion in Bellator history? He won the Bellator welterweight tournament in season 4, and then he won the season 6 lightweight tournament.
Well, I don't know if he won. He lost to Huron
Oh, that wasn't in the title. Oh, that's right. That was in the finals. That was in the finals, and Heron went on to have the controversial decision against Askren. My bad, my bad. Yeah, I got confused because Hahn, I personally thought won the Heron fight.
So I was gonna say, well, I mean, it was close, but yeah,
It's very
I
close.
had Han in that one for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so Heron went on to win a controversial decision against Rick Hahn, then lose a controversial decision. So never mind about the two tournament thing, but he's competed in two tournaments, and he won the lightweight tournament, and against fairly tough competition. I mean, Lloyd Woodard and Brent Weidman, aren't world beaters, but they're pretty respectable opponents.
Well, Cupcake flattened Pitbull. That's Pitbull's only loss that we were just talking
Yep.
about. And man, kind of off topic, but I was dying to see Han and Askren. I mean, two Olympic level, Olympic judoka, Olympic wrestler. That would have been phenomenal. I would have loved to see that.
Yeah.
I was feeling really good about Han in that fight. But I mean, him at lightweight, he's a fucking tank. I mean, he's a big boy, and I just don't see Chandler being able to impose his will on him at all. I
It's gonna
mean,
be very difficult.
yeah, I just flat out don't see it happening. The best way to, I mean, he's not going to do it in the clinch. If Han has his wits about him and his balance underneath him, I mean, that he's an Olympic judoka. You're not
Yeah.
going to off balance the guy.
Although Chandler's grappling credentials, I mean, NC Division One All-American, captain of the University of Missouri wrestling team. So this is a guy who can contest a takedown with the best of them, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see, because frankly, the American Olympic judoka team is not drawing from as deep a talent pool as the American wrestling programs around the country are, and so
True, true.
I'd be very curious to see, where they are as athletes, and also I think a factor is Han's age. He's not getting any
Yeah,
younger, and
that's true.
he's given up. He's given up. He's 36. He's given up about a decade to Chandler.
Yeah, he's getting up there, and of course, the other one is wrestlers come in really well attuned because they're used to plying their trade with just a singlet on. Where,
Mhm.
judokas, that's just like Brazilian jiu-jitsu guys. They're used to the grips. They're used to yanking and pulling. Han seems to adapt it very well, but what I think his strength there is been repelling takedowns to stay up and
Yeah,
employ his
he's
kickboxing.
excellent at defensive takedown defense.
To go back to what I said, I can see Chandler using like his explosiveness and timing to drop levels and catch Han off guard by springing from outside, exploding from a distance, and catching him with a low single or even a double. Um, I don't see it as real likely, and I don't see anything happening in the clinch. I do think Han is going to be more technical on the feet. Chandler loved the guy. I mean, he throws like a madman, but he leaves himself open quite a bit. Han does
It's true.
not. I'm kind of doing a little. I mean, we all do a little MMA math, but I'm looking at. I think Huron is probably a better boxer than Chandler.
Yeah,
Bigger, he's cleaner.
definitely got longer
Chandler's
range.
yeah, and Chandler's just really loose and wide. He doesn't have, and that's what Han does have. His chin, his hands are always stuck to his chin, and
Yeah.
everything is really uptight. Where Chandler's still, maybe from that wrestling background and his stance, and he doesn't blend his striking and takedowns as good as Huron.
Yeah.
So for whatever that's worth, yeah, I'm going to take Han in this one for sure.
Wow,
Yeah,
calling the upset, and that would be a
yeah.
spanner in the works because Bellator has big plans to force Eddie Alvarez back into the promotion and that legal action, and then they want to put on a pay-per-view with Michael Chandler and Eddie Alvarez at some point, and some point soon. And so, if Rick Hahn comes along, he's got a big opportunity to play spoiler. I'm going to go with Chandler just because of two things. Hahn's age. I think he's at an age where skills are going to atrophy fairly quickly. I'm not saying that's happening to Hahn, but just something I look out for at fighters in that age group. And secondly, I like a winner. Chandler's somebody who's been through the gauntlet to beat Eddie Alvarez. In that third round, it looked like Eddie Alvarez wasn't just going to beat him, but might kill him. And Chandler came back from that and won the fourth round. It was something like out of Raging Bull, one of Jake LaMotta's fights with Sugar Ray Robinson. I mean, it was an incredible pendulum swing. And I just, Hahn, having come up short in his biggest fight of his MMA career against Jay Heron, makes me question whether he can turn it on and really has the indomitable will that it takes to knock off a champion, particularly in a 5-round fight. But I definitely see him as a live underdog and respect your call on that one. Any final
Thank you.
comments?
No, I see it going a little bit, because they're going to come out and throw hard. At least I know. I think Chandler's going to come out and get after him, and because Hahn is he's just so feisty defensively. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes and leave a lot of holes. Chandler does, and I don't think Han's going to let him off the hook like Alvarez did.
Yep, yep. Well, we'll see. We'll find out tonight. Also wanted to mention Hector Ramirez and Jamie Yeager, other additional UFC veterans that are going to be on the preliminary card. So should be a fun fight. I know you'll be watching them live, as will I. So let's move on to UFC on FX7, which is taking place this Saturday. It's in Sao Paulo, Brazil, the UFC's first outing to that city. Apparently they've had a little bit of trouble selling tickets, which is kind of a surprise since they've been such a huge success in the Brazilian market and done very well in Rio de Janeiro. But something's going on in Sao Paulo. Could be transportation issues. If you've ever spent any time in Sao Paulo, you know it's a little difficult to get around if you don't have your own helicopter. So maybe that's a factor. I don't know. But
That's surprising. I'm sorry to interrupt. I didn't know ticket sales were down because I love any event, especially UFC's in Brazil, because the crowd's just loony. You know, I mean, you can feel the electricity. So that's
that was a couple weeks ago, and I didn't get a chance. Meltzer had not put out the newest Wrestling Observer when I went to bed last night, so I don't know if they had an update on the ticket sales. But as of 2 weeks ago, ticket sales were slow. Hopefully they picked up. I'm sure they'll paper it one way or another, and we'll have a full card, a full house of frothing at the mouth Brazilians, and hopefully they won't riot. Not that I'm worried about that, but historically that's been a problem for Brazilian MMA promotions. But let's start with this card. I'm not a racist. I'm a historian.
I didn't even. That was Chewbacca. I didn't even.
I see. Chewie, you're on watch.
He doesn't give a fuck.
He's got that. He's got that Disney money.
Does he look nervous right now?
Did Chewie get a piece of that George Lucas buyout when Disney came a calling? That's what I want to know.
I'll have to ask him, but he didn't want me to discuss. I had to sign a waiver. So.
I see. Well, that's probably wise on his part. So we got one fight on Facebook. You ready for this? Lightweights Francisco Trinaldo versus C.J. Keith. I got to tell you, not a lot of fans know these guys. What do we need to know about these two dudes?
Well, Trinaldo was on Tough Brazil. Good. I mean, good. Let's see. What I don't have my brain or Wiki or Sherdog.
He dropped a decision to Gleison Tibau in his UFC second UFC fight. He won his first fight against a fellow Tough alumni Delson Helano, but then he put up a pretty gritty fight at UFC 153 against Gleison. And Gleason's infamous because he's probably a middleweight who fights at lightweight and just an enormous guy. And
so is Trinaldo, though.
But he's not as big as Gleison.
No, a few are.
Yeah, and I thought he did very well. C.J. Keith, however, a virtual unknown.
Well, he got blasted up by Ramsey Nijum in his debut. And he was an Army guy. He's a guy that went right into the Army and got into the Army's hand-to-hand combat thing. And I think he's got a Thai background, too. He kind of reminds me of like a little mini Jim Manawa, where he throws, you know what I mean? I mean, he's the kind of guy where when he just hurls everything into all of his punches and kicks. And he's really legit, but he's facing a terrible, Nijum. He hasn't had an easy road here because Nijum was a really tough matchup for him. And Trinaldo's just a scrappy bastard. He used to fight way up in weight. He dropped back down to 155 post tough and gave Tibau a really good fight. He's a decent striker, really good submissions, and he's got really good wrestling too. And he's just a tough as nails guy. So I think he's going to be a pretty straightforward, easy pick for this one.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Trinaldo too. The Nijum win, I'm sure that wasn't reflective of everything C.J. Keith has to offer, but it certainly showed that he can struggle in a dramatic fashion at the UFC level, and I think Trinaldo is going to pick up the win here. I think there might have been an eye to that by the booking, actually, to give the Brazilians best chances. So let's move on to the Fuel TV card, which is going to be a 6-fight card before the FX broadcast starts. The first fight, light heavyweight Ildemar Alcantara versus Wagner Prado. Prado, of course, had some bad luck getting eye-poked by Phil Davis and then losing the rematch by Anaconda choke. But pretty formidable before that, undefeated up to that point on the Brazilian circuit. How do you like his chances against Alcantara?
I like him a lot. The bottom 3 Brazilians on this card are all they're taking really favorable matchups. Yuri Alcantara is dropping down to bantamweight, thanks to whoever reminded me that on Bloody Elbow. But they all are facing guys that it should be a really favorable matchup for him. And Prado is one. I'm pretty sure this guy fought in a younger. Alcantara fought in a lower weight class before. I mean, Prado got thrown in
Yeah,
with
he was a middleweight in Jungle Fight. He made it
yeah,
to the semifinals of one of their tournaments there. So
yeah, and I
he's
mean, a legit guy, great. I'm happy to see him get a chance, but he's fighting. First of all, Prado came in and fought Phil Davis. How's that for your debut? I
yeah,
mean,
that's a very tough welcome to the big leagues right there.
right, right. And I think he's getting a little bone here because this guy, Alcantara, it's great to have him, but it just seems like it's a gimme fight for Prado. Prado is just a devastating tie striker, southpaw with mean strikes. I mean, a real nice, almost a Crow Cop-esque straight left, a real streaking, scorching straight left. Throws nice high kicks, no setup. He's a bruiser. He's way behind the game in wrestling in submissions because he was a Thai specialist before that.
Mhm.
But I read on UFC.com in most of his interviews that that's what he's really focusing on more than anything. So I like Prado by a TKO in this one, probably pretty quick within a round or two.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you there. Best wishes to Alcantara, but I think you're right. This is probably a gimme for Prado, and look forward to seeing what he can do with that opportunity. Now we got the bantamweight Alcantara, as you mentioned. Yuri Alcantara is cutting down. He's fighting Pedro Nobre, um, another virtually unknown fighter. What do you make of this matchup?
Well, Alcantara, I actually, one of my biggest foot in the mouth moments was when he fought Omagawa, and Brookhouse was like, I don't even see anything Omagawa's got for this guy. And I was like, oh, yeah, I don't see anything Alcantara's got for Omagawa. Like, whoops,
Well,
delete. Wish I could delete that one. But I was really impressed with the dude. I mean, solid all the way around. Good wrestling, really mean Muay Thai. He's a black belt. Really solid, complete fighter. He's smashed Ricardo Lamas in the WEC,
yep.
which I mean, Lamas is one of the top contenders right now. So, and I think Nobre also fought as low as maybe flyweight before. Again, great
Yep.
candidate, good to see him, but man, he's taken a stiff test in his debut, and he's fighting up a weight class. So Alcantara, all day, some kind of finish. I don't know. I think he'll have his. That's what I like about him. He's got a lot of options. He can finish on the feet. He can finish with submissions. He's got great scrambling. So unless
Yeah.
Nobre, comes out proving that he's a beast, then I like Alcantara quite a
I mean,
bit.
I think anything can happen, especially when you get two Brazilians that both like to strike. You could see a Pier Sixer breakout, as they used to say. But Nobre is the smaller man. He's relied on most of his wins are by knockout or TKO. A few submissions in there, but I don't see this being a demonstration of the subtler aspects of mixed martial arts. I expect this to be pretty much a brawl, and I agree. I got Alcantara here, which brings us to lightweight. Edson Barboza trying to get back on a winning path against Lucas Martins. Barboza was undefeated. People were talking title shot. Then he fought a late substitute named Jamie Varner and got his head handed to him. Frankly, Varner came out and beat Barboza's ass. And so this is, you think Barboza's going to turn it around, get back on the winning track against the 24-year-old chute box fighter and Lucas Martins?
I do. I'm real interested to see how he approaches this because Martins is, shoot boxer, stand-up specialist. I mean, everyone, just when you say he's a shoot box fighter, that should tell you, a lot about him.
That's
Lot of
chute
knockouts.
boxer.
All
Chute
right, there,
boxer.
Professore.
Well, just to want to avoid confusion with shoot boxing, which has nothing to do with the Chutaboxa camp that brought us, it's the first camp of Wanderlei Silva, Mauricio Shogun Rua, and Anderson Silva, among others, one of the most legendary camps in all of MMA. Anyway, back to your preview.
Ever enlightening you are, Nathan. I
I,
appreciate that.
I try to inform my less educated viewers about MMA history.
Um, Considering the loss to Varner, and I mean Barboza, rightfully so, was on fire as a prospect. I mean,
Knockout of the year win over Terry Edom right before that with a wheel kick, just
probably
as
one of the best
flashy as
knockouts
shit.
in MMA history ever. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
even if I consider myself a crusty old school or whatever, that was just shocking, phenomenal, jaw on the floor. But what I'm interested to see with Martins being a stand-up specialist, whether Barboza obliges him on the feet, which is risky, or whether that Varner win, I guess, what degree of hesitation or caution is instilled in him after that. I think Barboza's got an incredibly underrated wrestling and jiu-jitsu game. I had the privilege of seeing him live for his debut with Waylon Lowe, and the dude was a beast. I mean, Lowe tried to take him down a couple times,
wow.
and I mean, Lowe's not a world beater, but I think he had some decent college wrestling, achievements, and Barbosa countered his takedowns and, I mean, slammed the dude onto the mat. I mean, this wasn't pick up off the ground, but I mean, he dropped levels, hit a sprawl, and reversed and just flattened low from there. Good scrambling. So I'm interested. This will be the first big evolution for
You sure he
Barboza.
fought Waylon Lowe? Because I'm not seeing him on the Fight Finder.
Oh no, maybe not. It's a dude that was a
Mike Lolo?
featherweight. Mike Lolo. I'm sorry.
Yep.
I confused those two for some reason. But he crushed Lolo, and I mean his low kicks either thudded so sickening that I wanted to vomit, or they cracked so loud they literally echoed throughout the whole stadium. I mean, that was a showcase. The whole press row was. And Damon Martin MMA Weekly told me beforehand, like, watch out for this Barboza guy. So he had a big wide grin. But either way, I'm interested to see what Barboza does. Is he just going to try to be an exciting guy and go out and fight this guy in his strength, even though it's risky, and try to throw hands with him, or is he going to throw in a takedown here and there, or is he going to completely try to close the range and play it safe?
I mean, look at his past. I mean, I think the Anthony Njoukani fight back in 2011 was maybe the best indicator of how he'd fight. Njoukani, of course, has a very different style than the shoot-to-box guys. He's not a Thai fighter, more of pretty much a twin of Barboza with a sort of Thai or a Taekwondo-based starting point that then added to a Muay Thai training in the background. So they were fighting at range. And as I recall, Barboza was pretty good at disrupting Njoukani's range and doing things to throw him off his game. Of course, Jack Slack did a great breakdown of Barboza recently on Bloody Elbow and pointed out that, for somebody with as highly regarded striking as he has, he's got a limited palette of techniques that he draws from. He uses the Melvin Manhoff strong side punch, strong side kick combination to catch people off guard, uses the low kick as his main go-to, doesn't like to get in boxing exchanges, had a little bit of trouble with Ross Pearson. One of the judges thought Pearson won that fight. Was split decision win for Barboza. So it will be interesting to see how he does against a shoot-to-box fighter. Of course, the shoot-to-box, archetypal style is looking for the Thai plum, looking to get their hands around the neck, get the double collar tie, throw the knees to the face, get him down, throw elbows to the face. So we'll see if Martins can turn it into an ugly brawl. I think that'll be his best chance. But I tend to think Barboza's going to come back strong against a kid making his UFC debut and maybe get the knockout.
I think Barboza, I don't want to say his boxing is weak, but I think that if you totally isolated only how he uses his hands, it's not. I mean, his dazzle is range fighting from the fringe with a lot of kicks. He's not a weak boxer, but I think that's what Pearson, I don't want to say exposed, but Pearson proved that when you get into phone booth range where Pearson's a real adept boxer, that's where he caused problems, and Ross just kept marching right into his wheelhouse, which everyone thought was insane. So, and that's what the shoot-ta box guys like to do. And I think that's going to be his best bet, is to create a brawl, make it ugly, get into contact range, get his hands on him and maul him in the clinch, and to stay out of the, off the fringe and watch out for those kicks. But I'll go Barboza, but I'm a little more interested in this one than the latter two at the bottom of the card. I think it's going to be more competitive.
Yeah, I think this should be an interesting. And that brings us to another interesting fight. We've got featherweight Diego Nunes, who's been kind of a prodigal prospect for the UFC. He's been real up and down in his WEC and UFC tenure. Some pretty good wins. He beat Mike Brown, Manny Gamburian, but then he drops losses to Dennis Seaver, Kenny Flory, and LC Davis. So he's somebody, he just came back to beat Bart Palachevsky, and I think showed that he had turned a bit of a corner in his development as a fighter and as a more disciplined, and has learned to be more aggressive when he needs to be. I think he's somebody maybe who was content to coast for decisions before. But Nick Lentz, totally different animal, a classic UFC wrestler who's struggled at lightweight a little bit, lost to Mark Bocek and Evan Dunham back-to-back, had a no contest in a fight that was a loss to Charles Oliveira before the thing was discounted. Although he did submit Waylon Lowe, your man Waylon, making an appearance in Nick Lentz's. But now, he moved down to featherweight and destroyed Ichi Mitsuoka at UFC 150. And so I think this is a big test for both these guys. Who you like?
Well, it's weird what you say about, Nunes, because he's had, I think, 10 fights in the UFC, yet I think a lot of people are still,
That's
kind of
10 fights
unsure.
in with Zuffa.
Yeah, I'm
Like,
sorry. I tend to lump those two together.
yeah, the WEC I think is pretty well shown that that was UFC caliber
Right.
competition, just in a
Yeah.
smaller cage.
I mean, I consider them both the big league, so I add up a lot of guys that came over as, whatever. He's had 10 major
11,
league fights.
11 fights between his WEC and UFC career.
That's what I said. 11,
You
11
said
fights.
10. You said 10.
I know, I know.
All right, all right.
Thanks for letting me get away with that.
All right, all right.
But he's gone to a decision in every one of those fights.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm not the kind of guy that doesn't like decisions, but what that tells me is that his striking, I mean, for as fierce and ferocious as it is, and it's fast as hell, there's not a lot of power there.
No.
And that's fine, though. I mean, that's the sacrifice. I'm going to collaborate with Tom Grant, because Bisping does that. The reason he's not a big power puncher is because he's got phenomenal takedown defense. So he doesn't dig his feet in and just plant for the home run shot. That means that against Lentz, that power would be really good against Lentz because he has holes in his striking defense.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I want to say, most of the times he's lost, besides like Bocek, he's gotten clipped, and that's
Evan
been.
Dunham certainly clipped him.
Oh yeah, and that's been kind of a notable flaw. So if he doesn't ramp up that power against Lentz, I think Lentz, with his size and his wrestling and his tenacity, he might have to chase him down a little bit, and that's how I see this whole thing going. Is Lentz is going to go after him.
Mm-hmm.
So Nunes is going to have to decide if he's going to ping one or two and constantly circle out into open space, which that's probably smart, but
That would be the smart game plan.
It would, but especially, I mean, when you just said you don't like decision, that's I don't know. The fans aren't going to like it. He's going to have to be extremely, extremely elusive in order to win against Lentz with that game plan.
Yeah.
And I think because he's been in there so long, he doesn't want to do anything mediocre. I think he's going to want to come out and make a statement. But if he does, I just see Lentz taking him down and having his way with him on the ground. I believe Nunes is one of the few Novo Nio guys that's not like a ridiculously accredited, jiu-jitsu guy. Not that he's bad, but he usually scrambles free to get back on his feet.
Yeah.
So I think Lentz is going to be a little bit bigger, definitely stronger, and the better wrestler. So I'm gonna go with Lentz in this one by decision.
Yeah, I think the odds of this fight going to decision are prohibitive, and I gotta favor Nick the Fence Lentz. I think he'll clinch him up against the fence rather than taking him down early on at least and mug him. Force him into the phone booth or into the sub phone booth, the inner phone booth, where the clinch fight takes place when you've got a collar tie, at least one collar tie on, and you're eating uppercuts and elbows. I think both of these fighters have made a concerted effort to become more aggressive and not coast to decisions. They want to please the fans. They want to please the UFC. And I think this is one of those fights that's sort of a Rubicon. This one fighter is gonna win this and move on up with his career, and another fighter is going to lose this and probably never establish themselves as a contender in the division again. I think this is one of those. This is a pretty big fight for these two guys, and I think that the winner of this will go on to be a factor in the featherweight division. I don't see either of these guys ever being champion, but I do see the winner of this fight making a title run, potentially making it all the way to a number one contenders fight. And I'm going to take Lentz.
Okay.
And then we'll move on to middleweight. Hani Marcus against Andrew Craig. Is this another gimme for the Brazilian?
No, not at all. I don't think so. I just meant, I think all the fights we had covered previously: Barboza, Prado, and Alcantara. Craig is another guy. I'm totally baffled by him because he came out against Noak. It was his debut. Kyle Noak isn't a superstar, but man, he's got a ton of experience. He's a tough dude, well-rounded, pretty good kickboxing, excellent jiu-jitsu. And I think there was something afterwards. He didn't feel good or he was injured, but Craig just, I don't want to say toyed with him. He convincingly and commandingly handled him throughout that whole fight.
And then he knocked Rafael Natal the fuck out.
Except before that, Natal, who was before striking, his striking was icky. That was a big weak point. But he was just dotting Craig up on the feet. To the point where he was really, giving him the business. And then that knockout was a bit of a Hail Mary, come from behind.
Great fight. If you haven't seen that fight, that was a little watched fight, but a real treat if you can find that on UFC.com.
It was a good one, but now that I'm unsure about Craig, I don't know. I know he's a brown belt under, I think, Travis Tuke. Anyway, Craig is going to be a phenomenal prospect. I'm really interested to see how he progresses, especially after those first two fights, But Hani Marcus he's a beast. He's a big boy. He's
He's
dropping
younger than
down.
Craig. He's only 24.
He is one of the few, like we were saying with Babalu before. He's got good jiu-jitsu, good Muay Thai, but his wrestling. And I know people pick on Vamola for his Czech wrestling championships or whatever, but he's a big, strong dude. It's not like he's a pussy to
He
take down.
definitely out-wrestled Carlos Famola. That was at UFC Live Hardy versus Lytle back in 2011.
Handily. I mean, there was no question. I mean, he had his way with him.
And he beat Aaron Simpson, who's one of the better, at least accredited wrestlers in the UFC. I was really surprised by that fight.
And based on that, I have trouble seeing what Craig's, I see Marcus, being able to impose his will. He's a fairly three-dimensional guy too. Tie on the feet, really strong wrestling, and excellent position and control, along with a submission savvy on the ground. So, interested to see what Craig pulls out, because, like I said, he's a question mark. But I definitely like Marcus in this one. Decision if he can't finish it late.
Yeah, I do too. I think there's a slight chance, maybe a 10% chance, that Craig lands another one of those Hail Mary knockouts. I mean, once you've seen a guy establish that he's got knockout power, and once a guy has learned that he has knockout power, that's always a live threat. But I agree with you. I think Marcus is just too dominant and should go coast in for the decision. Now we got a featherweight fight, Godofredo Castro versus Milton Vieira. Who you got in this one?
It's not that I'm a huge, immense fan of Vieira, but I've always, he's been around forever. He's been in the game since, I think, 2000, 2001, inventor of the Anaconda choke. He's an old Lucha Libre guy, too, who migrated over to BTT under Mario Bustamante. Mm-hmm. Phenomenal grappler, probably one of the best grapplers in the game. He's a master of all, like, head and arm type chokes, Bravo, Darce, Anaconda. He is really clever. His scrambling, his transitions are off the hook. He's going to be a little bit bigger, and so Castro or Pepe is a grappling specialist as well. Didn't please a lot of fans against Hani Jason, trying to pull guard a lot or whatever.
Yeah, no, that was in the featherweight tournament finale for the Ultimate Fighter Brazil. Yeah, that wasn't a very fun fight, I got to say. For a lot of people, that was their first impression of Castro, left a bad taste in their mouth.
And based on that, I mean, I don't know. He's going to get slaughtered if he pulls guard on Vieira. You know what I mean? I mean, he's kind of a one-dimensional grappling guy facing what I feel is definitively a better, more experienced grappling guy. And I would also give Vieira the slight edge on wrestling and striking too, even though striking is not a strong point for either guy. But Vieira's been in with Maha Sakurai, Jake Shields. I want to say like 80 to 90% of his losses are extremely legit. So I like Vieira in this one. I just think he's a bad matchup for Castro.
Yeah, I think the question mark, I mean, Vieira's been fighting since 2001. I think, again, the only question mark is his age at 34. But the guy that I see really exposing Vieira's limitations would be somebody that's just extremely athletic, sort of a featherweight Eric Silva or somebody like that. And I don't think Castro is that guy. I think Castro is more your sort of classic Brazilian grappler who doesn't have a plan B if he can't get the fight to the ground. And against a better grappler, I don't know. I could see this becoming your infamous, ugly, bad kickboxing match. But I think Vieira is too experienced, and I think he'll force it into a position where he's going to get Castro with a front headlock, some kind of front choke. Bravo, Darce.
That is specific.
I rarely do that, but
I appreciate that. I know. I like it. Going out on a limb.
Yeah, I just have a vision. It came to me while I was drinking my oolong tea.
Absinthe? Your absinthe-tinted tea?
I wish I was drinking absinthe. No, I mean, I don't really wish I was drinking at 11 in the morning, but
I wish I was. No, I don't.
It does sound nice. If you could just have a nice tipple and then not ruin the rest of your day. But anyway, we're going to move on to the FX card. Got 4 fights on the FX card. The first fight expected to be lightweight Thiago Tavares against Khabib Nurmagomedov.
Well
There's
said.
no way my odds of saying that. Tell us how do you say the dude's name?
Nurmagomedov.
Nurmagomedov.
On the broadcast, they say it like Nurmagomedov or whatever, but yeah, they both sounded better than your version. No offense. Nurmi. Let's call him Nurmi. I thought I came up with that for this.
Nurmi's undefeated, 18-0 coming off a unanimous win over Gleason Tebow. He also submitted Kamal Shalarus, helped end Shalarus's MMA career. So he's 2-0 in the UFC, going against Thiago Tavares, who 28 years old. This is a guy that at one point came into the UFC undefeated, reeled off a couple of wins to start his career. Looked like he was going to be a lightweight contender. Since then, he's dropped losses to Tyson Griffin, Matt Wyman, Kurt Pellegrino, Shane Roller. But he's won big. He's beat Spencer Fisher, he beat Sam Stout, beat Pat Ottenwood, Manny Gamburian. Just a real up and down guy. I don't think he's an excellent grappler. Not that solid on his feet. He's got some power, but has some gaps in his game. What do you think? You think that Nurmi is going to piss off the Brazilian fans by beating their hometown kid?
I do. I'm, shit. When he came in, it was, combat sambo guy, and I remember you and I both were, yeah, well, who knows when he gets into the UFC, and
Yeah.
so he lamped Shalarus, and then what did you think about the Tibau fight? Do you remember that? It was close, but Rogan and the commentary guys were thinking it was all Tibau.
Rogan, no disrespect, he's by far the best MMA play-by-play guy in the history of the sport, in my opinion, but he's got a tendency to get homeritis, and Tebow is somebody he's seen fight a lot. He knows what to look for, and I think that was one of those fights that if you watched it twice, back-to-back, and the first time you said, I'm going to watch Tebow, and the second time you said, I'm going to focus on Nurmagomedov, that you would possibly score the fight differently. It's just one of those, the way they were coming in together. I watched that fight a couple times and tried that experiment. I honestly thought it depended who you were watching strike, because you would watch the one guy strike and miss the counter strike he was eating.
Yep.
In response. And so I don't have any problem with that decision, mostly because I think we've seen the peak of Tebow, and we know what Tebow is and isn't going to do, and he isn't going to be lightweight champion at any time or even get a title shot, I don't think. Whereas Nurmagomedov, I do think, has the potential to earn a title shot. I think Tavares is just going to be another bump on the road on his way there. Not even a bump. I mean, Tavares is tough as shit. I'm not saying it's going to be an easy fight. I just don't see a real clear path to victory for Tavares. I don't think he's got better striking, definitely not better wrestling, and I think on the ground it's going to be a stalemate at best.
We've yet to see Nurmi on his back,
and I don't think we'll see it this time.
I don't either, but based on what we've seen of both of them, I would say Tavares is the better, or at least he's got the more proven submission grappling. But I tend to agree with what you're saying. I mean, so Nurmagomedov was fighting Tebow, who's notoriously, who I think just should be, he's a great gatekeeper at lightweight. That's not a bad thing, but he should be a good litmus test for everybody. But he's huge. He's a monster.
He tired out Nurmagomedov carrying that weight.
But no, I mean, the fact that the Russian brawled, he tangled up with him, and he was not thrown around. He kept pursuing takedowns on Tebow. I think that's why he won. Whole different topic. That's technically it's failed aggression, but he was just all over him relentlessly. And the fact that he, went power for power with one of, if not the most powerful lightweights in the game, and held his own, it was just really eye-opening for me. Now it's like, holy cow, this dude has got really good striking. He's aggressive. He's fun to watch. His clinch game is sick. His wrestling and takedowns are looking really tight as well.
Well, he trains with the American Kickboxing Academy, and I think that might be really the difference. I think some Russian fighters don't adapt to American training methods and don't modernize their game when they come to the UFC or Bellator, and I think some do. And I think that training with the American Kickboxing Academy, you're going to be in there with some big, strong, skilled wrestlers day in, day out.
I think we were talking about this before. Don't they train with Constantino down at Team AMA too? And I know there was some.
I believe that. I've heard that they have. I don't know if he's done that for this training.
I think Constantino was in his corner against Tebow, and Constantino and AMA, I mean, they're as legit as it comes too. But either way, I agree with what you're saying. He's orienting his training to the American style. So that nixes what we always, because that's usually wait until this, foreigner gets a taste of the American style. But he'd been an M1 for a while before that. But either way, I mean, I'm shocked. At first, I thought maybe a little bit of a novelty, but no, I'm on board. I'm interested to see what he can do. And should be a nightmare matchup for Tavares. Tavares is a little guy for a lightweight. He's
Yeah.
a his tenacity. Here's what I'm interested in. Nurmi has beat both of his guys by nonstop pressure. His pace is frenetic, and the one thing that Tavares will match him or exceed him on is that pace. I mean,
Hmm.
he's the little energizer bunny. So it'll be interesting to see how he reacts with that. Unfortunately, I think Tavares is his size and that Nurmagomedov's wrestling is going to be better. So I think that's going to trump, his pace, Tavares' pace and speed in this one. So I like Nurmi in this one.
Yeah, I got to go with him. And I want to mention, Tavares is with the Brazilian top team, and they've lost. They still got Murilo Bustamante, the former UFC champ and MMA legend, as the head coach, but they lost Mario Sperry to the Black Zillions, and I don't feel like that's a camp that's necessarily at its peak. That's kept up with the times. I don't think it's the top camp in Brazil anymore, and I don't even think it's the best of the various top team branches around the world. So.
Going from my memory here, but I thought Tavares trained, and I can't think of the name, Atake Duplo, or I remember just that I didn't know he was with BTT.
Yeah, I mean he's listed on the Wikipedia page at least for what that's worth.
Check Sherdog real quick if you can.
Let me pull up.
ATAQUE, and then it's DUPL something. And I remember there were one or two other guys that popped up in the UFC that were training under that.
You are right. Atake Duplo is his camp. My bad, my bad. Yeah, yeah. We got. Looks like he's the biggest name. They've got Daniel Dos Santos, Ricardo Trelawney. So smaller
Terloni
camp.
was Terloni was another one, the Bellator guy. And I got to
Yeah,
tell you, Wiki is shaky for
shaky
all
fight
their
camps.
on everything what they claim is the unified rules is not, and people always used to argue with me and say, well, look at Wiki, and that's not even
It's true,
close to what the unified rules are.
and Wiki has its own weird political dynamic going on, wherein some of the Wiki editors are literally trying to squeeze MMA out of the website and are locking a lot of pages so they can't be updated by fans and various things, and then not keeping them as updated. So you are correct. I should not be using Wikipedia. In fact, I'm using MMA Linkers Fight Wiki for most of my reference work.
And that's solid.
Yeah, and but then that brings us. So we're both going with Nurmi on that one. Am I correct?
Word.
All right. So that brings us to the heavyweights. Two sort of prodigal again. I'm going to use that word again. Ben Rothwell and Gabriel Gonzaga. Both of these guys, UFC veterans, who've kind of struggled. Neither of which Gonzaga at one point challenged for a title fight, but that was way back in the Randy Couture was the champion then. And he's never really been the same. He's been up and down, in and out of the UFC. Retired at one point after a couple of UFC losses, but now he's back. Got a win against Edinaldo Oliveira at UFC 142. Ben Rothwell out with injuries for quite a while. Then he came back and beat Brandon Schaub by KO and in a slobber knocker. That was an ugly fight, I thought, and lost to Mark Hunt since his return from injuries. Who you got in this one?
Big Ben all the way. And I thought in his last fight, he was shredded. I mean,
Yeah.
in the past, he was always big and not necessarily chubby, but he was not. He was cut, he was defined, but that boy had a fire in his eyes. I mean, that
Mhm.
was someone gift up just his like the pre-fight when they were announcing his name, and it was chilling. So, and I love to see that. I mean, Big Ben is a guy that was one of the best outside the UFC. He and Fedor for a while were like the
Yep.
easily the best heavyweights outside of the UFC.
He was the IFL champion. Beat Roy Nelson back in the day.
Yeah, and I mean, for how tall is Big Ben? 6'8", 6'9"? I mean, the dude he throws high kicks, in place.
Yeah,
Really,
he's listed at 6'5".
really
But
okay, and that could be. But either way, for a guy who has to cut to make the heavyweight limit and who's that tall, but in the IFL, I mean, he was just cracking off high kicks, real on balance. So,
mhm.
I definitely am going to pick him in this one. It's one of those where I felt pretty strongly about it, and I'm not down on Gonzaga, but if you really look at his record, if you take away that Crow Cop head kick, and I know, I mean, that's not fair if you take a fighter's best, but he's been
Yeah.
pretty disappointing other than that.
Yeah, when he's fought the upper echelon, he's got losses to Junior Dos Santos, the former champ, but he also got murked by Shane Carwin in a fight that he was in early on, and then Brandon Schaub knocked him out too. I just don't think. I think the book on Gonzaga has been, if you can hurt him, demoralize him, that the fight kind of leaves him before he leaves the fight. and I think that's not something you can say about Big Ben Rothwell. And so I'm expecting Ben Rothwell to not just win, but get the finish here, second or third round.
Me too. I'll say first or second round.
Wow, pretty bold, Dallas. Pretty bold.
It's
That brings
not that
us
bold.
to the middleweight return of CB Dollaway against Daniel Serafian. Who you got in this one?
Um, this is one where now from this point forward, I haven't done any of the dissections on this, so I haven't done hours of research and background on each fighter, and I'm looking forward to doing that for Serafian because he is, I want to say, ahead on the betting lines, and people are really, really super high on him. So I just need to investigate that because I think Dalloway is a really solid guy. With some of the submission savvy he showed after being coming in as a wrestler,
Mm-hmm.
I was really, really impressed with that. But then he had the fight like the Jared Haman fight where, I mean, it looked like he gassed out 2 minutes into that fight. That was head scratching, to put it nicely.
Yeah, I don't know if he's still training just with Ryan Bader. For a while they left the team in Arizona and started their own gym. I think they've started training with other professionals than just themselves. But I think there was a little element of not having a boss in the training camp and training themselves and full for a client, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I like Serafian in this fight. I watched a couple of his fights, and it's hard to say. There's always such a leap up in talent, and also the octagon jitters and everything. And this is a pretty high level fight to be coming in and making your UFC debut, and the co-main event of a major card in Sao Paulo. It's got to be a lot of pressure on the young man. So we'll see. And Dollaway is somebody I think that the fans and the betting lines, he's not very popular for whatever reason. Bloody Elbow readers will tell you it's the way his face looks. I don't think there's anything wrong with his face. I think he's a fine-looking young man, but he sets off people's douche alarms, I got to say. And so I think that he is penalized a little bit and not respected as much as he should be because he's followed that Matt Hughes, Jake Shields, Babalu template of adding submissions to your wrestling, and which is a very effective fighting style. If you think you can get most fights to the ground, why not learn to finish them there? But I don't know if that's going to work against a submission artist like Serafian. I don't know. I think this fight's going to come down to who's got the better striking, and that's an X factor to me. I really don't have any idea.
And I agree with that too, and that's one of the things that I really want to research is if, going back to what you said about the wrestling, if you're the better wrestler but outmatched in submissions, I thought like Rory McDonald against Nate Diaz was a perfect example, and he did that against Condit. Hit your takedowns, impose that will, but back the fuck out of the pocket and don't engage with them. So that's one option for Dalloway. But what I really want to do is watch a bunch of footage and try to map out what they're striking, how I feel that's going to play out. I'm not super high on Dalloway's striking, but kind of what you just...
That's the weakest part of his game.
Oh yeah, for sure. But and on top of that, he's been really inconsistent. Dalloway at his best, I would take him in this fight just based on overall status and his game plan. But I think I'm still going to take him. But again, I need to go back and review a ton of footage to form a more confident opinion on this one.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Serafian just with my gut, but I don't ever do the sort of in-depth research you do. I got a lot of editorial tasks that eat up my day, things like budgets and blah 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 that nobody cares about. But and I don't either. But it has to be done, so it takes away from my fight prep time. And I'm glad we've got you to do the dirty work. But that brings us to our headliner: Vitor Belfort versus Michael Bisping. My cohort, Eugene Robinson, is worried for Bisping. Not so much because of this fight, but he just sees, so you beat Vitor Belfort and you get your title shot, then what? You're going to beat Anderson Silva? So he sees this as kind of the end of the line for Michael Bisping. Not necessarily this fight, but the end of the line is very visible from here. What do you think? You think Bisping's going to get his title shot? And is that a prize worth asking for?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, we were saying that about Dalloway. A lot of people are really down on Bisping, and I don't quite.
He's a dick.
He can,
He's a
yeah, but
dick.
all of us are dicks. And on top of that, think about if people actually cared what we said.
Oh
If you
yeah.
make, shit, I about lose my mind half the time when people are so finicky in the comments. But you got, Bisping with a bunch of people, riding his nuts and just looking for any little thing to jump on him for. But either way, so whatever. I think he's a really good fighter. I think he takes a little too much crap for the pillow hands thing. I think
Mhm.
he could not have the phenomenal defensive wrestling and takedown defense and sprawl he has if he that's how he has it because he doesn't plant his feet and overcommit
Yep.
he doesn't run that risk. um, I do think, and the other thing about that is when he wants to, he can dial up his power a little bit. I mean, he's got a handful of stoppages via strikes.
Yeah, when he does get a stoppage, it's generally because he gets somebody hurt, and he will pour it on, particularly with knees. He's very ugly against a hurt opponent, and will just pour it on.
Oh, like with Mayhem, that was, I mean,
Yes.
huge fight IQ throwing those knees to the body. So
Hmm.
I really respect how intelligent he is. His fight IQ, I think, is phenomenal. I do think that he's made kind of a name for himself fighting grapplers where he could just do the sprawl and brawl thing.
Hmm.
I mean, I know he fought like Chris Lieben, but again, I mean, that's, a good matchup for Bisping and his methodical pinpoint striking, Lieben's caveman loopers.
And he deconstructed Brian Stan. You know, I thought he totally outclassed Brian Stan.
And that's what he's polished. He is extremely, extremely polished. To be honest, this is one where I'm not, you know what I mean? A lot of these fights I've had a strong feeling right from the get go,
Hmm.
like with Hahn and Big Ben and that kind of thing. This one I'm not too sure. And again, I mean the classic. If there's ever a fighter, which one is going to show up? I mean, Vitor Belfort, crown or coined that phrase pretty much.
Yeah.
I think Vitor's speed and power is going to be a major, major concern. I mean, think about it. Unless Vitor is, real light on the trigger, I mean, if he punishes Bisping when he tries to stay on the fringe and hop around and plunge, a handful of strikes with a high output, eventually I just see, Vitor unleashing that flurry and just the speed of his hands when he's on it. Vitor seems to kind of throw casual combinations or he goes balls out. In a
Yeah.
balls out Vitor is something that I think you should do more. I mean, if you're going to lose, don't lose by, I mean, hell, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Go out in a blaze. Of course, really easy for us to sit back and say that kind of thing, but
Yeah. Do or die, boys.
right,
Give
yeah,
me another beer.
yeah. If you're going to lose, and I'm usually not like that, but with Vitor, I mean, he does not have time left. You know what I mean? And now
No.
he's getting a main event. This is pretty much do or die for him. I mean, if he loses this, I can't see anyone being excited about a Vitor fight again.
No, no, very true. And Vitor fits the profile. Like Bisping has had two kinds of losses. He's had controversial losses to wrestlers like Rashad Evans and Chael Sonnen, where a lot of people thought he won those fights. I personally thought he won both of those fights. But the other kind of fights he's lost has been where he's gotten in there with a guy who is just bigger, stronger, and tougher than him, like Dan Henderson and Wanderlei Silva, and they just showed, that you hit me, I hit you, I hit a lot harder than you do, and you're in deep trouble. And Bisping kind of folded a little bit. Not so much against Wanderlei. He was in there, till the end with Wanderlei, but taking a beating. And with Henderson, you could see from the first time they locked up, and he felt Henderson's strength, that he wanted no more of that. Of course, his response was to circle right into Henderson's power hand for one of the all-time highlight reel KOs. But and Vitor really, honestly, I thought Jack Slack's breakdown of Vitor as a brawler and not a boxer was pretty brilliant and spot on. Vitor's not somebody who feints. He's not somebody that looks to catch you with a counter. He's not somebody that throws elaborate setups for his combinations. He's looking to force his way in close and start throwing straight punches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and just kill you with speed and power at a very, very close range. He likes to fight in a tighter space than the phone booth, but throwing punches, not looking to tie up, wants to keep his hands free. And I could see if he hurts Bisping early on, it could be a quick knockout for Vitor.
I mean, who does that in boxing at the top? Who boxes with all? You know what I mean? I mean, I love Jack to death. Absolutely,
Yeah,
the best fight analyst in the game, I think, by far. But compared to
especially at
his
spot.
standards are really high. You know what I mean? I mean,
Sure,
he
sure.
can find holes and I love that about him. He can find holes in JDS's game and Vitor's game. But I mean, yeah, Vitor is he's a brawling boxer. I would never write off his boxing skills. I mean, he's an excellent boxer, especially for
His
MMA.
speed and power, his hand speed and power are incredible.
Yeah,
It's so
but that's MMA. You
yeah,
don't go 12 rounds and look to, you know what I mean? I mean, there's not.
yeah.
I can't think of a lot of guys who are like this shining technical example who still have power and are at the top level in the game. You know what I
It's
mean?
true. It's true. It's
You know what
very
I mean?
hard. I think Bisping has better technique than Vitor, though. I
Absolutely.
think he's got more counters. He's got more feints. He sets things up. He keeps his defense tight. But he doesn't have anything close to the hand speed and power that Vitor brings to the table. And I think both guys in their losses have been in losses where you can question their heart. I think we've seen both of these guys fold before they lost the fight. Not
Why would
often.
you say that about Bisping? I thought he showed
The
great heart
Henderson
against.
fight, I
Well, he
thought
got he got the pit. It's hard
he
to
got
have. He
he
was
did.
unconscious.
Yeah, but even before that punch came, I think from the first time he tangled up with Henderson and felt his strength, there was a very clear, oh shit, get me out of here vibe
I
to
agree with
him.
that. I
You
totally
know,
agree with that. But
and
Henderson's got the best right hand in all of MMA, so I don't hold it against him that he
not at
had.
all. And I'm also, Henderson's somebody for over a decade we've been hearing, from heavyweight after heavyweight that's sparred with him or grappled with him that this is the strongest human being they've ever tied up with. Like guys that outweigh Henderson by 30 or 40 pounds are walking away from a sparring match with him going, holy shit, that's the strongest human being I've ever felt. So, there's certainly no shame in being afraid of a monster like Dan Henderson. I'm not implying. I mean, the thought of fighting Dan Henderson gives me the willies.
Wet your pants a little. Well,
Yeah.
I don't. I just the original point was I wouldn't. I personally wouldn't say that Bisping has showed a lack of heart. I think he's shown excellent heart, especially in all the huge, dominant grapplers he's faced.
Yeah, I
Some of the
wasn't trying to say that
God,
he doesn't have heart, especially not to the extent that Belfort doesn't have heart, because Belfort's one of the most
right.
infamous not heart having fighters in the history of MMA. I'm just saying when he does lose, he has shown that he can be intimidated. I think Wanderlei Silva intimidated him. I think Dan Henderson intimidated him, and Vitor Belfort is a very intimidating guy when he's on his game.
I would agree with that. My only point was, Vitor and Wandy's probably the most intimidating guy ever.
Yeah.
And then Henderson. So I'm just trying to look at the overall gradient. I mean, I'm all right with Bisping. I think he's going to have more fortitude and heart and determination than Vitor. He's more polished overall standing, but unless he picks a spot, and Vitor's got a great chin too. So I don't know, unless Vitor unless the opposite happens to Vitor, in case he starts to think, "Holy cow, I'm trying to plant my straight left, and this guy's bobbing under and pinging me with two or three as he's circling
Yep.
back out." So I can definitely see that happening, but overall, I think the power and speed of Vitor, if he uses it and relies on it, even if Bisping outpoints him for the majority of the round, I think Vitor is going to have the more memorable offense, and I think he's either going to catch him, stun him to get a strong definitive round, possibly finish him. But I'm thinking the Phenom on this one.
Wow, you're going with Vitor. I got to go with
Oh yeah,
Bisping. I like Vitor's chances. I think he has maybe a 40% chance of winning the first 2 rounds, but this is gonna be a 5-round fight, right? And I think over the course of 5 rounds, if Vitor hasn't won already, that he's gonna fade. Um,
the length of the fight absolutely favors Bisping for sure. And this is one where I've kind of seen it. I don't know how it's going to go, but the way I'm leaning towards is, within a round or two. And I think actually if Vitor, this is a chump pick, but if Vitor doesn't blast him out, finish him, or make a huge statement within the first 2 rounds, it's probably going to be Bisping's fight from then.
Yeah, I have to agree. I have to agree with that. And I think there's no shame in picking Vitor Belfort. I think it's a very good reading of the odds and the probabilities of what's likely to happen. I think there's an excellent chance that he murks Bisping early on the way he murked Akiyama and so many others. Wanderlei Silva, just on and on. He's got a long career of early quick knockouts that have people talking, Rich Franklin demolished him. And Bisping, of course, has claimed that he's training to defend himself from punches to the back of the head, which he claims are the source of most of Belfort's recent knockouts. So, classic Bisping shit talking there, but
How do
fairly
you,
apt, I think.
you do that? How do you train for punches to the back of
That
the head?
I'm very curious about. I would assume putting your hands behind your head, but that puts you in a bad spot to eat knees to the face and a lot of other nasty things. So,
Yeah, it's interesting.
You know, who's to say? Who's to say? Well, that covers the card, and so we'll look forward to seeing Bellator tonight, Bellator 85. UFC on FX7 will be Saturday. It'll be on Fuel TV and FX. Bellator will be on Spike TV. We'll be posting this on BloodyElbow.com. You can read all of Dallas's dissections there. As always, remember to subscribe to MMA Nation, and you could be like the even dozen people that are watching this sucker live. And otherwise,
Thanks to that dozen.
Yes, thanks,
the dirty
guys.
dozen always with us.
Yep, and the rest of you can watch this on Bloody Elbow. We're going to post this early tomorrow morning to get ready for the fights. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, Dallas.
Bye.